And of course, when it comes to consular services in Israel, we stand ready to help. Now let me talk to you about Lebanon and the evacuation. We have been able to get 200 Canadians out over the weekend. We also have another flight with 200 Canadians leaving Beirut today to go to Istanbul. 600 seats have been reserved, and we're also looking at more. And flights are all between Beirut and Istanbul. My point to all of us watching, if you are offered a seat, please take it. And it is time to leave Lebanon now. And please don't go to Lebanon. The reality is the seats that we have been securing have not all been taken. And so that's why I want to make sure that people listening to us or watching us know this very well, because we have 4,000 people that have asked information about departure. We've called, as of this morning, 1,700 of them. Only 50% have taken the offer. And I know it's a tough choice. I know that the situation is extremely difficult, but my priority is your security, and that's why if you're offered a seat, please take it. Donc, on a tous vu les attaques par l'Iran contre Israël,
the attacks against Israel by Iraq, which we unequivocally condemn. Attacks by Iran will further destabilize the region. I've been in contact with my Israeli counterpart this morning. It's an extremely dangerous time at the moment in the Middle East. Our thoughts go out to all of those who are experiencing and going through this situation. I'm monitoring the situation closely, and we remain at the ready to assist those who need it and those who are in Israel. For all Canadians in Israel, we are ready to help you if you need it. As for Lebanon, through commercial flights, we've been able to get 200 Canadians out. They were able to leave through the Beirut airport over the weekend. Another flight of 200 people will be leaving today from the Beirut airport, and we do have 600 seats that have been reserved. All flights are between Beirut and Istanbul. If you are offered a seat and a ticket, please take it. The reality is that not all the offers made have been taken. At this stage, we have 4,000 people who have requested information for assisted departures. We've contacted about 1,700 of those people by internet or phone, and only 50% of them have accepted the offer. I know it's a very difficult situation and that it's a very difficult choice. But please, take the offer. As Minister of Foreign Affairs, my priority is your safety. It's time to leave, and it's time to accept that seat on the plane. I'm open to other questions.
We've been in contact through text.
What did he tell you, and what did you say to him? What's Canada's message to Israel at this time?
So he reiterated his own position, which is basically Israel's right to defend itself. And that has been his position since. And our position has been since that, of course, we need a ceasefire and we need this war to stop.
So how do you assess at this point then the risk to people, Canadians in particular in Lebanon, the risk of an all-out war and the risk to their own lives?
Well, right now we're seeing that there is a war. And we just saw that Iran attacked Israel. So, and there is also a war going on in Lebanon. So we are in a scenario where there is a war in the Middle East. And so that's why I just said this is a very dangerous time in the Middle East.
Is it Canada's position that Israel should not respond to Iran? I mean, you've called for a ceasefire vis-a-vis Hezbollah, but this attack from Iran, is Canada asking Israel not to respond in kind?
We need to make sure that there's no escalation. Of course, Israel needs to be able to protect itself, and that's why we'll continue to support its security, and we'll support, of course, through the Iron Dome. At the same time, we need to make sure that parties sit down and the war stops, because we can see that what will happen, there will be even more further escalation, more innocent civilians, including women and children, die. And that's what I said at the UN yesterday. We need this war to stop.
At the UN, you talked about demanding for peace in the Middle East. Do you feel a bit powerless now that it seems like situation's escalating? What control or power do you have in this situation?
I believe in diplomacy. I believe that it is possible to get to peace. I believe that we're in a moment where we need to save lives. That's my job. And my job is to reach out to also our like-minded, including, of course, the G7 foreign ministers, reaching out to Israel and making sure that there is de-escalation. And that's what I'll continue to do. That's Canada's job, and that's our voice in the world. En français?
Israël donne pas répliquer à l'Iran?
Moi, ce que je dis présentement, c'est que bien entendu,
responds to Iran. As I said, Israel does need to be able to defend itself. But one thing that is very important is that the war needs to stop. There is no scenario where this will turn out well. For weeks, you've been asking for de-escalation, a de-escalation of the war. But we could say we've seen now an escalation. Do you not have any resources? What else can you do? I think the diplomacy is still working. And this is why I'm in contact with my Israeli counterpart, as well as my colleagues from the G7. We need to continue to put pressure on them.
Can you stop talking together? Yes,
is it on Israel? Now you talk about a diplomatic solution as needed.
It's on
but is
all,
it on Israel?
Tonda, I understand your question. It's on all parties. It's absolutely on all parties. Last week, we were on the verge of a ceasefire. That didn't happen. When I went to bed on Wednesday night, I was convinced that there was a ceasefire. And so, well, parties need to accept, and they need to engage in diplomacy. But right now, there's not happening between parties. And we're many of us around the G7, many other Arab foreign ministers, putting a lot of pressure. And that's why we need a ceasefire to happen, because at the end of the day, we need to have time to have these conversations. That's why last week we were trying to negotiate a ceasefire of 21 days in order to have peace talks and in order to save lives. And so at this point, that's why I'm calling for a ceasefire, because we need to make sure that ultimately these conversations happen and we save lives. Dernière question.
Quels sont les outils qui nous restent? Ça fait 1 an qu'on craint que le conflit dégénère, et là, le conflit dégénère.
Since the threat of conflict has been there, that it would deteriorate.
Nos alliés.
So what do we have left to convince our allies and others that there's something left to be done? What are the tools? Answer? The tools are still and always have been diplomacy. The tools have always been to push our stakeholders. In Canada, we're not having a conversation with Iran. We don't have diplomatic relations with Iran. We are having conversations with other Arab countries and diplomatic conversations, and it's essential that this war ends.